Very good morning to all of you. As Arvind, the Managing Director of GIS mentioned, I feel very happy to be here because it brings back some very, very beautiful memories. Of course, a lot of advancement has happened between then and now, but I'm talking of approximately before 2000, before the Y2K, we used to be talking about it back then, which now seems very, very, passé and may not be very relevant today. We moved from the millennials to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, as we said, all that. There's so much happening. But what is wonderful is that, this whole focus, the fact that we're all meeting here together, as Sudhi just mentioned, it's not just the government of India, government of the state, Gujarat, but all the stakeholders we are coming together to really have these forums. They become enriching places where we can exchange our ideas, thoughts on digital transformation and see what is it that we can adopt, adapt in our organizations, because it's a collective. I mean, what we are now, Viksit Bharat, that we're talking about, in all this turbulence that we see across the world, it is absolutely imperative that we learn from each other, strengthen ourselves, and really leapfrog to become better than the best. And I'm no doubt, I mean, if you see the quality of human resources, the people that India has produced, our country, because look at the top entities across the world, it is us, Indians. So it's a matter of pride for us, not arrogance, but a matter of pride. And I think this is a good point for all of us to, again, be a part of it. I'm very happy to see this whole focus here on digital transformation. So as we understand, it's not just about putting the same inefficiencies, the same thing into technology, but then it's actually about changing the governance systems, bringing in better processes, and as was said, the XPX, how is it that you make the experience for users, different users within the system, outside, all of it, how do we blur the silos so that the citizen is not hopping from one to the other, so it all becomes for anyone, how do you fortify, how do you empower them with the choices, the ways that you can navigate absolutely easily, seamlessly, not just across departments, but I think the first step is also within departments. So I want to also share a few of the initiatives we're doing today. As was mentioned, I'm currently working in revenue department, and I want to acknowledge my entire team which is sitting here. Can I request all of you to stand up? Nilesh, Rinesh, Neena, there's some people working day and night on putting our systems in place. Thank you. So just to give you an idea, land, as you know, is the basis of everything that stands on it. So when we talk of medical facilities, when we talk of industry, economic growth, when we even speak of IT infrastructure, educational institutions, agriculture, you name it, any sector, ultimately the power of land on which it is located. I mean, even if there is IT, something on the cloud, it does have some physical presence somewhere. So in that sense, we worship land not just as a piece of earth, but something which is almost like a living entity, something that has kind of consciousness to it. So in that sense, one of the first things we felt is within the revenue department, you have all these silos of development. Again, as I was tracking my own journey, and as Arvind so kindly acknowledged that this is with a lot of reverence for all the people who have contributed to all these developments. For example, in the revenue department, we've had those of you from Gujarat, and I think a majority of you are from there. We have a system called e-Dhara. I mean, Arvind yourself, you've been a collector, and we all know of it. This started, I still have pride in the fact that I was a part of this great change way back in the year 2000, around 2001-2, where our taluka, one of our talukas called Jambugoda, it was one of the first to get into e-Dhara, which meant the digitization of our records back then. But if you look at the entire journey, it's moved a long way from there. So we have these verticals called e-Dhara, which is in a way the substratum on which all these applications work, because we've digitized our record of rights, the mutations, the details about the khatedar, all of this. So that's like the breadboard, talking in PCB language that we all start with, that's the basis. But on top of it, we had several applications. For example, Garvi, which was for registration. Then we also have something called ilouge, which is for measurement. If you have a piece of land, you need to measure it. You apply for it. The entire thing is automated. Then we have revenue case management system, and of course, in a way, the major architectural monolith in it called IORA, which has a host of today about 36 different services, which are now going to increase hugely. We're moving into a low-code, no-code mode as well in it, and really bringing in a lot more of improvement, transformation in it. So with all of this, the system we inherited maybe a year and a half ago was that, again, these were all in their own right robust systems, but they were not talking to each other. And then came something very fascinating, which also was initiated in a way by Government of India, but we became a part of it. Just as Sudeep was talking about the Jandan, Aadhaar, mobile, and this whole UPI, Aadhaar, we all agree it was a big, and it is a big game changer in so many ways. I mean, anyway, even if you use some app like the Digiyatra, I mean, it's much faster. Sometimes we at this stage have the privilege of something called protocol at airports. There's somebody who ushers you in and takes you in. But I feel that the Digiyatra is the mother of all protocols. You just walk and you're there. And even at the security, probably that's the only place, and then that's really short, and then you're on the aircraft. So saving of time, making things so much easier, the experience. I think all of this is what digital transformation is about. So it's about how do you interlink all these legacy systems which have been built. So the bricks are very important with all our reverence, respect, because without these bricks, you can't fancy something which will be interconnected and make these transformations without having those building blocks, those rootedness on the ground. So coming back to our land records and how these silos are now in the process and have got integrated, we came up with something like Aadhaar, which Government of India has also initiated something called a unique land parcel identification number, ULPIN. So which means every parcel of land like an Aadhaar number has a unique number. And this is again not something which is isolated or limited to a state. This is something which is pan-India, which means that with it, it's a fuzzy logic. It's not as if you can decrypt it, it's encrypted. You can actually figure out which is the parcel of land located, let's say, in Tuticorin, or let's say in Vijayawada, or maybe parts of Himachal, anywhere in India, you can identify with this unique number. Not just that, it went a step further and said that even for vertical, you have a pad of land at the bottom, but there's an apartment, let's say with 100 properties. So there is also something called a unique property identification number, UPIN. So Gujarat has been one of the first states now where we have actually assigned these UPIN and UPIN numbers to the properties, and there is now a very fascinating concept of land stack, which means with that number, you can actually get something like 36 different parameters where everything, all the deduplication is done away with, so you can identify what is the tenure, what are the cases going on in this piece of land, when was the trans measured, what is the revenue, title, and legal occupancy status, all of it by just this number. So this is a way of actually, integrating the silos, I would say, shrink wrapping them, getting them together onto one. So this is something that we've been able to put together. And what it has helped us do is, as was said, it makes us feel that this has lent itself to what is called ease of accessing revenue services, EARS. So a government that has ears, that listens, that is sensitive to the needs of the farmers, industrialists, and common people. While this is not to say that everything is hunky-dory and that there are no problems, there are definitely challenges that we are trying to battle with. But as we do this, we're also trying to bring in a full regime of transparency, accountability, and openness. For example, on the 8th of April last year, we came up with a very, very big path-breaking change, a GIA government decision, which meant that we would have new tenure and old tenure land. So in one stroke, in all the rural areas, the new tenure land has been done away with, and they've all become old tenure, which gives a lot of ease. Similarly, for deciding on the status of whether a person is an agriculturalist or not. Also, we have taken a floating 25-year period. So these are also the process changes, because digital transformation is not just about digitization, but the governance, making rules and systems that liberate us from a lot of things that make us go around in circles. Collectively, the Revenue Department is also now working on something which I think would be another big game changer. Of course, there are a few more very important legislations which are around the corner. In fact, we had put it in the public domain about 2 months ago. One is about removing what is called tukda dhara, this fragmentation of land, because the size of a tukda, or a tiny piece, fragmented piece, that whole concept and context changes once we come into today's date and time, as against what was the prevailing situation perhaps 6 or 7 decades ago, when these acts were brought into play with an idea of consolidating and bringing about better agricultural productivity. We find that that is now a little irrelevant or less relevant, so we did put it in the public domain to solicit feedback, views, and so on. And similarly, the other thing we're also planning now, for which we had got feedback from the public, we put it in the public domain, is about the instant nature of making the changes. We have something called the 135D, 135D in the Land Revenue Code. So the government is on the verge of doing away with both of these. So these would also be big path-breaking changes in the system gradually as we move towards making things more and more relevant, easy access, transparent, and so on. Now, while we talk of so this is like a digital ecosystem, so within revenue as well, where all these services become accessible. So with the UPIN, you'll all be very happy to know that we're also integrating, more or less in the final stages, with the urban systems, with systems that they have like e-Nagar, which means that if a person has changed or sold his property or her property to somebody else, the other person does not have to separately go and apply for changing the name in the property tax, water utility, or even electricity. So all of this will seamlessly happen. So the interlinkages, the minute the property changes, the property tax, water, utilities, all of this will directly start coming in the name of the new person. So this linkage, all of this is also being made possible with this single UPIN and UPIN number. Similarly, now Revenue Department also deals with disaster management. So we're also in disaster, something that cuts across all departments. So we're also in the process of getting all the departments to come on a single platform. More or less, we are at it. And I will also, since it was mentioned, I also want to share, before coming here, something related with Tokte disaster. We had a cyclone called Tokte. This was perhaps in the year 2020, around then. And I want to share that, with something simple, but which was remarkably, game-changing that we did in health. It was something that the Honorable Prime Minister launched. It was called Technology-Enabled Community Health Operations. We had micro data of every household, and we still have it. It's called TECO, which is used across the state, where we also had data on all the pregnant mothers, which stage, which month, the micro details of their condition. So when you have a disaster like this, and there's a bit of indefiniteness, we do not know how long the cyclone will be, and so the purpose of technology is also to ensure that the vulnerable segments are taken care of. So we had a way of actually ensuring that people whose expected date of birthing was within the next 1 month, they were all carefully, proactively, as a preventive measure, moved to a safe health facility, or those with complications, because should there be something, and it was very heartening that at the end of Tokte, when we emerged, there was not a single case of any mother having any serious complication at all. And certainly all the birthings happened in the safe confines of the institution. Similarly, now we're also working with this whole concept of not just Apna Mitras, but also how do we have citizens in every village, every nagarpalika, every city, in every ward, and how do we empower them also to give us instantaneous inputs when there is a disaster, but also ways to ensure that if there is noise, sometimes it could be something which is not correct, authentic. You also have a way of titrating it and making sure that the information that comes is correct and not something which is, sometimes with an intention to give any other input which is other than truth. So to conclude, and also I think this was the SDG ranking. This is something I take pride in. We're all, as we said, we're all a part of a continuum. We as civil servants, and I think all of us, in whichever walk of life we are. When we were, for example, I was very happy to see you from Cisco. I took a picture and sent it to my friend Harish, just to say that. So we do see the trajectory of all of you. You were working in different organizations at different levels. It is like we say, it's like a yagna. We're all giving our ahutis at different points of time, and it's like a journey that all of us are contributing. So going back to the health experience, I was very happy that initially, I had just completed my stint at that time in the Rural Development Department, and for our country, just as all of this is important, using technology even in something as simple as making India open defecation free. We did. Every toilet we constructed collectively in the state of Gujarat, about 3.3 million toilets. And it was not just about the brick and mortar, but it's also about behavior change. Because if it's a toilet which is constructed and people use it for storing their most precious things, then the whole purpose is defeated. But in that too, the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, we had geotagging audits to make sure that each toilet is actually built, what is the material that went into it, the payment for the people, whether it was a self-help group or the individual who was building. So the entire thing was driven by technology, so which becomes like a sunshine. So when you put it on the public domain, people are open to it, and it also makes us accountable. And I know of many instances where against our wishes, sometimes we also have to take drastic measures like filing FIRs or taking disciplinary action in cases where we found something was not right. But after that, the impact, like we say, many of these interventions have an impact not just in that segment, but in another sector as well. So when this open defecation problem, and for the Honorable Prime Minister of a country to stand on the ramparts of the Red Fort and talk about, to have this sensitivity concern for a country which was almost like the open defecation capital of the world back then, talking of way back 2015, and in a matter of 14, and said in a matter of 5 years, we would make India open defecation free, and we have done it. This is not to say that you may still have one or two stray cases of people defecating in the open, but the definition of open defecation free is when it is more than 95%, and the behavior change. Definitely, we can all say that these sites, when you traveled by trains and you would see people sitting and defecating, and it was really, in some ways, it is something that really moved a lot of us, shook us, because while we all belong to one India, you felt that there was also another India here, because the very thought, if people told us that from now for another 12 hours you'll not be allowed to go out for nature's call. That's something that we can't even think of or imagine. But a whole part of India, especially women, children, pregnant, elderly women, men, they were all living in a situation like that, where you had to wait for the cover of darkness to actually go out and defecate. So these things, so India gives us these opportunities also to make a difference in the lives of people who may not be as fortunate as us in some ways, and yet we move forward. But coming back to the health sector, when we inherited this, we were at the 17th rank, as was mentioned, and the sex ratio was in fact among the lowest at that point of time. This is again, all these things are cyclical. Sometimes things are better, sometimes things improve or worsen. But using this technology, because our decision making has to be informed, we were able to figure out which of the pockets where the birth of boy child, the male child was more, and so these gave us indications of where it's more of a predictive and also something like a preventive or proactive intervention, and started working on it. So all these parameters, there was something like 7 plus 4 more 11 parameters, which were also weighted averages of various things that the Niti Aayog United Nations uses. So our rank improved to be 8th with the use of technology, and finally we came first in 2021. It was a very, very heartwarming moment for the entire team. What is even more fascinating is this was the year 2021, but subsequently we've had 2 rounds of this SDG 3 ranking, and Gujarat has still continued. So which means that it's not just something that went up in some kind of a measure ad hoc way, but then what the first rank that we got has been sustained. I'm not a great believer in ranks alone, but I think what is heartening is if it makes a difference and improves the quality of lives of people, I think that is the goal. So finally, as we ensure, looking at land, that farmers are secure with their land, how do we use digital transformation with all these applications that we do in the revenue department, agriculture, Ravi stack, they're all interconnected. So we're now blurring and breaking the silos within departments, across departments, to make it a more convenient experience. Similarly, how is it that mothers achieve timely care? And how is it that villages get early warnings to deal with any disaster, predictive, or which is even based on data that we have, what is around the corner, and how do we empower ourselves and prepare ourselves. So all of this, I think, if we can fulfill this in true sense, then digital transformation has fulfilled its goal. And I do hope all of us, this audience here, the people on the dais, and all of us represent government, technology players, and other policymakers and others from different organizations. Collectively, let's keep these conversations on and adopt many of these practices to make our country, our state, our villages, every part of our lives more wholesome and more hassle-free, so that we can contribute better for the overall quality of life across the world. Thank you very much. Namaste.